Welcome, Bills Mafia, to another edition of the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, Uber Hansen, and as you can tell, my typical co-host, David Foxy, is not here today. I don't know what he's doing. I'm pretty sure he's working. He's also done all of the back work on this show for me, so that I haven't had to do any of the random paperwork or setup for this show, so much appreciated to him. In his stead, I have a Dolphins fan of all people, Kevin Guerard, one of the few Dolphins fans I get along with on a consistent basis. In today to kind of give us a different perspective on some things, something that I personally need, and I think a lot of Bills fans need as well. So, Kevin Guerard, how are you doing today?
I'm good, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you, and that was a true sentiment. Dolphins fans on Twitter and me don't typically get along. There's you and maybe one or two other people that I can reliably have a conversation with, where it's not just like infighting. It's like, okay, here's what I think, here's what you think, and finding a middle ground there. So really appreciate that on Twitter, and excited to kind of talk through some things today. Before we get too far into things, we have to do a little bit of ad reads, a little bit of discussion of what pays the bills around here. The main one for us here at Cover One is the Cover One Pass. I'm going to let Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn tell you all about it.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
The joke that David makes every week, it's a perfect read yet again by Greg and Aaron. They do it well every single week for us here at the Cover One Roundup. Greatly appreciate them. One more note we have to go through too is our other sponsor, Underdog Fantasy Sports. Cover One is excited to continue its partnership with the most dynamic name in fantasy football, Underdog Fantasy. Football season may be over, but that doesn't need to mean your fantasy season is. NBA, NHL, MLB, tennis, soccer, and even esports. I've never fantasized about esports in my life, but I know there's people out there that do. They all have pick'em contests, so hop right into those if you're feeling kind of feisty. Are you fiending for NFL fantasy? There are always best ball drafts ready and raring to go to make sure you can scratch that it's left behind during the offseason. Use promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, and Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That's $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. All right, now we got those out of the way. We're going to dive into a couple topics here. So just kind of throw out a little bit of schedule, how this is going to go. We're going to do a little bit of free agency recap, talk about some of the quarterback movements throughout the NFL. We'll dive into some of the bigger name free agency moves, and then we're going to finish up with the state of the AFC East. So we'll hop into some Patriots outlook, Jets outlook, Dolphins outlook, and Bills outlook. I know what most people are looking forward to is probably the Bills and also the Dolphins as well. So we'll get into that here towards the end of the show. But before we get into any of that, there is some Bills news we do have to talk about. Taron Johnson, nickel corner for Buffalo, signed a 3-year extension, will be with the Bills through 2027. He has become an integral part of this defense, and he's the reason the Bills almost never play base. They play nickel more than any team in the NFL. They added in a little dime this year, but taking Taron Johnson off the field hasn't really been in the cards for Buffalo, and I think this extension kind of just proves that that's really not going to change in the future. Kevin, from your side, and you might not have much insight onto this or much, opinion on this, Taron Johnson, any thoughts you think when you think of Taron Johnson?
Oh, I was very sad today. It's a great move for you guys. Like he's, him and Kenny Moore are arguably the top 2 slot corners in the NFL. Fantastic tackler. I think I liked him earlier on than some of my buddies who are Bills fans did, because I initially recognized how quick he was to diagnose screens. That was the first thing that really jumped out at me, and his ability to close and tackle, which allows you to keep him on instead in lieu of that third linebacker, because he's so good even at a small size. geez, he hits like a 220 pounder. So kudos to you guys. Really smart extension. And yeah, sad to see him stand.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. He plays like a linebacker, even though he's a corner, right? So you see all these kind of listings of all the Bills are stuck in nickel. They only have 2 linebackers on the field. How can they defend the run? How can they stack blockers, do things along those lines? And I think Taron Johnson's kind of proven time and time again that the Bills are better with him on the field than off the field, whether that means they're playing Derrick Henry, who's just trying to power run up the middle, and Taron will come down and, lay the hammer on him, or if they're playing someone like Patrick Mahomes, where you have to be covering the entire field, whether that's the middle of the field to Travis Kelce, down in those screens to whoever the hell they're throwing the screens to. Yeah, he's become arguably the most important player of the Bills defense. Not saying the best. I think there's a couple other players that I would deem the best players on the Bills defense, but without a doubt, the most important for what the Bills try to schematically do on a week by week basis. Yeah. So now that that's out of the way, let's just hop into some of this free agency stuff. And even though free agency is very, very much far from over, it won't really be over till the start of the season. And even then, teams will still continue to sign free agents. There were a couple big moves. And, as far as the NFL goes, where can you start a discussion other than the quarterback movement? The biggest of those moves by far, obviously, Kirk Cousins signing a deal with Atlanta. My opinion, making Atlanta pretty much not a lock to win that division, but up towards a lock potential. How do you think Kirk Cousins and that whole experiment will work out in Atlanta?
He's solid, right? He's NFC Tua. He's good. He's not great. He's good, but you're right. In that division, with the competition that they have, I expect them to win. I expect them to clean up. Don't forget they signed Daryl Mooney there too, which is a nice sneaky little signing to pair with Drake London. So he's got a lot of weapons. He has a decent to actually above average offensive line there now. And I think that's going to be a really good signing for him. I would expect him to have like a big fantasy year.
Yeah, I mean, you add Kyle Pitts to that, right? Bijan Robinson, Drake London, like all these guys. They've had all these weapons for years and years and years, but when you don't have a quarterback, and Desmond Ridder, frankly, is not an NFL starting caliber quarterback who hasn't proven to be yet, your offense is going to struggle no matter what. And on top of the fact that they seemingly didn't really know how to use their weapons last year, like there were games where Bijan barely touched the ball and he was arguably the best player on that team.
Yeah.
Which watching friends with Bijan on their fantasy rosters, like just like crying game after game, like why is he not getting fed the ball? I think that having Kirk there though does kind of unlock the potential of a Bijan, not just in the passing game either, in the running game as well, because now teams have to commit to stopping the pass, where in the past they didn't have to do that. The one concern though is Kirk Cousins is kind of aging now, so how he will come through after this Achilles injury remains to be seen. I know we've seen him dancing, but throwing a football when there's 300-pound men attacking you is a very, very different style of athleticism.
I'd rather see that older quarterback come back from his Achilles than another one. We'll leave it at that.
Yes, for sure. And we'll 100% get into that guy who's actually down somewhere in the Caribbean with one of your players right now, also one of my players as well. But I'll leave it at that until we talk about the Bills and Dolphins here. Another quarterback move, and I think that this will be intriguing. And I have opinions on both of these quarterbacks, but both Russell Wilson as a free agent and Justin Fields via trade going to Pittsburgh now. So Kenny Pickett out, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields in. This is definitely an experiment that could go one way or another. I don't know if Mike Tomlin will allow them to go below 9-8, but Russell Wilson and Justin Fields might be just the catalyst he needs to possibly not have a winning record, even though opinion-wise, I think they're both better than Kenny Pickett.
Agreed. I think it's an upgrade. I think Wilson's an upgrade over Pickett, which isn't, I'm not saying much, but I have very low opinion on Pickett to begin with. But Wilson, I mean, he's so tough. He played well against you guys for a half. His numbers at the end of the year were really good, but it's just like, it was very deceiving, it seemed, when I couldn't believe when I saw his numbers, because I thought they would be worse than that based on what I watched. But he had a pretty good year statistically. Definitely an upgrade over Pickett. And for what they gave up for Fields, why not?
Yeah, it's kind of just almost like a shot in the dark, but like a scratch off that maybe you can hit that, pay a buck on, win $5,000 or something. Yeah, Russell Wilson's stats, just to kind of throw those out there, because you're spot on. Like, they weren't bad, and the talk around Russell Wilson is this guy's washed. He's not good anymore. So maybe the stats are slightly misleading, and honestly, they are. But he had over 3,000 total yards, 29 touchdowns, and 13 turnovers. Like, that's honestly a decent season for most teams and most quarterbacks. But for Russell Wilson in Denver, it was kind of viewed as a disaster. I think a lot of it wasn't just the numbers. I think it was kind of his perception in the locker room, his relationship with teammates, and all the issues that kind of came along with that. But yeah, Russ, he's an upgrade over. He's still a solid NFL quarterback, and at $1 million, or like the vet min, whatever they're paying him, that is not a bad move. Like, there's people kind of clowning the Steelers for that move. That's not a bad move. And then, like you said, they basically paid nothing to go out and get Justin Fields. Let's say Fields ends up playing this year and plays well. You can franchise tag him. You can do whatever you need to do to keep him around. I don't think that will necessarily happen, but why not have the lotto ticket just in case?
Exactly. And they're paying less than $4 million next year for the quarterback room so far, which allows you to put your money elsewhere, build up the team. Regardless, if you don't go with either of these two options, having a better team in place when you finally do go get your quarterback of the future is just going to help their development when they arrive.
Yeah, that is for sure. A couple other names to dive into from the quarterback side: Kenny Pickett to Philly, Mac Jones to Jacksonville, and Sam Howell to Seattle. So Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones, Sam Howell. So I tweeted out a poll. It did involve Justin Fields as well, who kind of ran away with the poll, but let's ignore that for now. Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones, Sam Howell. Your opinion, who do you think possibly could have a successful NFL career? And define successful for however you want for those three quarterbacks.
I think Howell has the best chance to become a full-time starter somewhere down the road. I'm not saying he will, but I've seen enough flashes and enough playmaking ability. He kind of reminds me of a young Fitz. I could see Howell playing for a bunch of different teams as the years go by and he gets more seasoning, being that kind of bridge quarterback that Gardner Minshew's trying to hold on to these days, that kind of deal. I think Mac Jones is in a great situation, and I think he could prove to be the most important of the three, because if Lawrence goes down again for a couple games, the Jaguars should actually be in contention. And I think he's good enough to get you by for a couple games. And then Pickett, I don't mind the fit because he is mobile. He does have some athleticism. So there are some parallels to what him and Jalen Hurts have. So you wouldn't have to change the offense too much if Hurts came out and he had to come in. So it's kind of another scratch off, as you put it. And I don't mind the stylistic fit, but he'd be my last of the three I would prefer.
Yeah, I think that I kind of align with all your opinions. Sam Howell for sure has had the most of those three, has had the most flashes where you've seen, and I'm gonna say these words, but also kind of take it back a little bit. You've seen elite play in very small spurts. I'm saying like play after play, elite. He made an elite play. He didn't have an elite game, but he made an elite play. And I don't really think I could say Mac Jones or Kenny Pickett have those elite level flashes. I don't think Sam Howell's going to be an elite quarterback ever, but he could win you a game. He could go out there and sling the ball and win you a game. He could also single-handedly lose you a game, which he did a lot for Washington over the past couple of years with a massive amount of turnovers. And it took him a lot of attempts to pick up the yardage he had. So I'm kind of there with the idea of like, there is something there. How do you unlock it? Could that happen in Seattle behind Geno Smith? Like Geno, I don't know how much longer he'll last there. So maybe Sam Howell kind of steals some shine there, or maybe he finds a place somewhere else. I like the Fitz comp too, because Fitz had that kind of gunslinger mentality as well.
A little bit of mobility, you know what I mean? Like
for sure,
decent enough arm, not afraid to go deep. Yeah, I liked it. I could see Howell being like a 12-year backup quarterback. You know what I mean? That kind of guy.
Yeah, in the right spot, like like when Fitz went to Tampa and kind
Yeah.
of just blew everyone out of the water with a couple 400-yard games, and then came out with his chains and sunglasses on. Yeah, it'd be funny to see Sam Howell with that gray hair here in the 10 years doing the same thing. Mac Jones too, like. I know Mac Jones gets ripped on a lot by Bills fans, a lot by Dolphins fans, a lot by Jets fans, because he's never really been great. And the problem is the way that Patriots fans treated him after his rookie season, like, oh, we found another Tom Brady, which was always a delusional thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Top 100 player after his rookie year. Yeah.
Yeah, that image will never die. And I use that all the time to argue why you shouldn't always trust what NFL players say in respect to how good a certain player is. Because if you're putting Mac Jones top 100 after one season, you got issues on your hands. But I do like the idea of him in Jacksonville, and Trevor Lawrence I am not high on. I don't think Mac Jones is necessarily better than Trevor Lawrence, but if Trevor does go down, I don't think the drop-off is as drastic as some people think from Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones. So you could essentially survive with Mac Jones if you have to for a few games until Lawrence comes back and plays that very average level of football he always consistently plays.
Very overrated. Much better athlete. He does provide obviously a lot more mobility than Mac Jones, and he's probably a little more clutch. I believe Mac Jones got his first fourth quarter comeback this year in his career, but I can't remember where they were playing. But I can. But like I'm not that high on Lawrence either. I think it has just been average. But every time I see a quarterback list go up, he's like 6 or 7. It's crazy to me.
That's all that pre-draft bias for him, and the term generational is going to make me lose my damn mind. I rail against the term generational because it's so overused. And Trevor Lawrence was generational back in 2021. He hasn't looked very generational to me. And the implication of saying generational at this point is you're saying he's going to be better than Pat Mahomes, and simply not there. Now there's another quarterback coming in the draft this year, likely going to Chicago, who people are referring to as generational, which, like I said, is going to break my mind. But Kenny Pickett, he's kind of a nothing to me, right? Like he's Philly's backup. I think if Jalen Hurts goes down, you're in big trouble anyway. So I don't really know how much you're going to do with Kenny Pickett. I don't know how long Kenny Pickett will be in the NFL, regardless of how some Steelers beat reporters seem to imply that he was one of the greatest quarterbacks yet to be unlocked in the NFL heading into this season. But that's basically all of the kind of quarterback movements. I did see one message here from Roy Collins talking about Zach Wilson could be an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. That's really not that crazy. The reason I'm bringing this up more so is Zach Wilson, right? Still on the Jets at this moment in time. They granted him permission to seek a trade. I don't know who is trading for Zach Wilson. I wonder where Zach Wilson will be this year. So if I asked you, I said 50-50 shot, you can bet either side. Zach Wilson will be on the Jets or he will not be on the Jets come training camp. What side would you be on?
I don't think he will. I think it's too big of a distraction. I think that the owner came out and said something about how we're going to upgrade our backup quarterback, which they did. So I really didn't like that Tyrod signing for the Jets.
Yeah.
Meaning it was a very good signing for them.
Yes.
So I you can't have this. What was he, number 2 overall pick, sitting third string, still getting all these questions in the media? Just get rid of him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like, having him in that locker room is not a good thing for him or for the Jets. But I also, another thing that kind of not bothers me, but I find interesting is a lot of times we talk about, biggest draft busts of all time. And Jamarcus Russell is one of the names that gets, or the name that gets thrown around. Ryan Leaf. Right. Zach Wilson's got to be in that conversation as biggest draft, but second overall pick, and has been just unbelievably awful and really hasn't flashed all that much ever. Maybe there was a game. His best game actually happened this year against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the best game of his career. And they still lost that game.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
He's just simply not a good enough quarterback to be on an NFL roster. But again, I think that pre-draft bias is going to kind of buy him some more time in the NFL. So that's all the quarterbacks I want to talk about. So let's just dive into a couple big name free agency moves. And these are just a few that I kind of, picked out of the bunch from a couple sites I looked at. The biggest one that I find really interesting and a topic around him, Saquon Barkley to Philly and the possible tampering that occurred in that process. I think that storyline is interesting. As a Dolphins fan, is there a player in your mind that left Miami that was beloved, absolutely beloved, and went to, let's say, the Bills, the Patriots, or the Jets, that it was really looked down on by fans? Can you? I honestly don't know from the Dolphins side. Can you remember any player like that?
Oh yeah, Jason Taylor went to the Jets.
Oh yes,
that was really bad. Really bad. We did not like that. Now, he initially left and went to the Redskins, and then he came back to Miami, and then he went to the Jets again, and then he came back to Miami. So at least we had the happy ending. It wasn't the Thurman Thomas, but it was, when he went for the Jets, it was heartbreaking because he's such a good dude. You know what I mean? It's like such a nice guy too. All your moms thought he was good looking on Dancing with the Stars. You know what I mean? Like, he was just a really beloved, nice guy who was one of the best defensive player we've ever had. And he went to the Jets. I hate the Jets. Like, I mean, the Bills and Dolphins, we don't get along, and our fans don't get along too well, but we get along on one thing. We hate the Jets. Like, at least New England had a bunch of championships, you know what I mean? But the Jets have just been awful my whole life. I can't stand them. So that was bad.
Yeah, I just looked it up to 11 seasons with Miami before he left, went to Washington, came back to Miami for a 12th season, and then went to the Jets at 36. Like, at that point, man, like, kind of got to hang it up there and just kind of walk into the sunset as like that's Dolphins, legend. Yeah, that Jets, that's a little black mark. That, I mean, I'm sure he's now in the Hall of Fame, absolutely beloved by all Dolphins fans, but I'm guessing at the time, which was, oh my God, man, that was 2010. I'm so old. I'm getting old now. Yeah, that's one that's got to hurt for sure.
Did you ever hear the story how he got in first ballot?
No.
It was, Tom Brady went to wrote a letter and did an appeal to the Hall of Fame board and asked them to put Jason Taylor in as a first ballot because he said it's the best defensive player he's ever played against.
Really? That is not. See, this is why we have Dolphins fans on here.
Right when I started to turn a little bit on Brady, I hate saying it out loud, but I kind of find him entertaining now on Twitter and stuff, and his little things. Like, I've stopped hating him as much once he left New England.
Yeah, I did not know that one. I mean, yeah, even as a non-Patriots fan, non-Tom Brady fan, non-Jason Taylor fan, I have to respect the fact that he, went out of his way to try to get a guy in that he thought was one of the best defensive players he's ever played with, which honestly, Jason Taylor's up there for sure.
Good Lord. Hang on. It's all of a sudden, I haven't been on my laptop on Twitter forever. I don't even have it up. And I keep seeing your photo. All your messages are coming through. Sorry, buddy.
You're good. Yeah. So the Saquon to Philly, Saquon's another guy where hasn't kind of lived up to that pre-draft, opinion of him, right? When he was coming to the draft, the idea behind Saquon was first ballot, guaranteed Hall of Famer, legendary talent, and injuries have played a role there. The fact that the Giants' offensive line hasn't been great, the fact that their quarterback hasn't been great has played a role there. But now he goes to Philly where kind of none of that really should be bothering him. In fact, he should have played behind the best offensive line he's ever had, the best quarterback he's ever had, the best wide receivers he's ever had, the best tight end he's ever had. Like, this is now kind of the do or die for the Saquon legend status. I wonder how that's going to play out in Philly. In my head, that has to work. And I just kind of, man, Jalen Hurts has the world in front of him with all the talent he has around him.
I mean, you got to figure if it worked for DeAndre Swift, it's got to work for Saquon. If they're smart, they'll use him also as a receiver out of the backfield a lot more because he is good at that, really good at that. But I agree. I wasn't as big on him coming out of the draft, and he had that 1 year, and I was like, oh, I guess I was wrong. And then ever since then, it's been kind of injury prone, and you keep waiting for this greatness to come out. but he's good. But I don't know, man. I don't know if I would have paid $13 million on a team that already had like, one of the top rushing teams in the league.
Yeah, the 13 million number is a big number for a running back at this point, because you're able to find running backs that are good enough to win. I mean, you look at the Chiefs with Isaiah Pacheco, right? Like, you don't need to pay a running back if you can find just a talented enough one. And I think, Pacheco compared to Saquon, I don't think the gap between the two has proven to be very large. If anything, I could argue Pacheco has played better the past few years. Another player that's kind of interesting too, Calvin Ridley to the Tennessee Titans. I mean, presumably he's going there for the money, right? Like, I don't think Calvin Ridley's going there and thinking, oh, Will Levis is going to unlock my career. Calvin Ridley's implying he's still 25 years old somehow, even though he's on the edge of 30. What do you think about Calvin Ridley to Tennessee?
A couple of years ago, I thought he was amazing. I thought he was really, really good. I thought he was going to just kill it last year with Jacksonville. It's a weird move for me. Tennessee seems to be like they finally understood once they got rid of John Robinson, the old GM, that this is not a championship team. They need to tear it down and build it back up again. And then all of a sudden they went out and got Hopkins last year. And I thought that was very strange. And then I was like, well, okay, maybe they just wanted one good guy to try and develop with Levis, which I understand if you put it to me like that. You want one guy to see, you want to see what your quarterback's capable of. You can't do it with him throwing to whatever they had left. Then they were going to let Henry go. And I said, okay, it makes sense. Youth movement. And then you spend all this money to bring in a wide receiver too. It seemed really strange to me. I like Ridley as a player, but I just didn't understand the fit.
Yeah, and to do that, it almost seems like a team trying to hold on to something that's not quite there, unless they truly do believe in Will Levis and they think second year Will Levis is going to kind of break out here, which who knows? Like, there's some crazy parts to Will Levis's game, but almost a la Sam Howell, where you see flashes, but you haven't really seen it all get put together. Granted, Levis, rookie, Howell, been in the league a couple years now. This all comes down to if Levis can kind of elevate his game. And now in that division, that's not a gimme division for Tennessee to compete at all. Like, Indy looks like they're going to be better when Anthony Richardson gets healthy. The Texans look like they might be right up there with the juggernauts in the NFL with all the moves they made this offseason. And then you've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, although we kind of talked about how neither of us are high on Trevor Lawrence, like, there's talent on that roster and they're a good enough team to at least compete for that division. Tennessee might be the worst team in that division, and to pay that much money for, Calvin Ridley, who is kind of up there in age by the time that team should be competing. It just, nothing really makes sense on that one for me.
Yeah, no, if you thought this was your year, like if they thought that this is the year for the one more shot or something, then why didn't you hang on to Henry?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I didn't get. Like, you got rid of Henry because you were moving to a youth movement, and then you signed an older receiver. Like, I don't know, man. It seemed really weird.
Yeah, that's an odd one for sure. Staying in the AFC South, though, like I had just mentioned the Jaguars being good enough to win. Just two names they brought in to bring up: Eric Armstead, defensive tackle, defensive end at times from San Francisco, who was rumored to go to Buffalo for a short amount of time, but the money that Jacksonville threw at him was just way too much for Buffalo to touch. And then you have Gabe Davis, obviously Bills wide receiver, much maligned by the fan base, but still a very solid wide receiver. Gabe's going to take over for Calvin Ridley. I think they're two good moves for Jacksonville, but I have to wonder, again, with the amount of money they invested into these two players, is this going to be enough to kind of push them up there with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens of the AFC?
Too many number two receivers, right? And it's all the guys that were number two receivers in Buffalo. And it's like now they paired him up with Zay Jones, I guess. But Zay Jones has blossomed. He's turned into a decent player. Gabe Davis is a decent player. Christian Kirk is a decent player. You don't mind any of those guys being your number two, but I don't know who you want being your number one. But maybe the idea is if you just have enough good players, they can't cover them all. But I don't know, man. I would have kept Ridley then, because at least he's going to draw a top corner. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It was a strange move for me too, but I guess I don't know. Maybe they're hoping Davis. He's what is he now? 26, 27 this year.
He's still fairly. I think he's surprisingly young. Like when you see the number, you're like, oh man. I think he might be 25. I'm pulling that up really,
At
really
least he's got
fast.
some upside then, you know.
He turns 25 in 4 days. Or no, at the end, April 1st is his birthday. Never mind. He turns 25 on April 1st.
So he's still young. Okay, well, maybe who knows? Maybe they're counting on him to develop, right? Everyone's got that Kansas City playoff game in their head. So that's when you think of when the casual fan thinks of Gabe Davis, they think of those games, right? Because those are the ones that stick out. It's the Bills fans that's watched every single game might have a different opinion. But like the casual guys, like, oh man, did you see that guy against Kansas City a couple of years ago? He's a monster.
Yeah, and he did have, there's other flashes, but that is the game people think about. The 98-yard touchdown he had against Pittsburgh was pretty good, and he ripped the ball away from Minkah Fitzpatrick on a play too, was great. But really towards the end of his tenure with Buffalo, he became mainly a blocker for the Bills, and he's a very good blocking wide receiver. So that's also another factor in this whole Jacksonville things, right? Like adding him to the roster just kind of opens up the game for Travis Etienne and should make him kind of a valuable every down receiver, maybe a little bit more so than Calvin Ridley in that sense, where Calvin Ridley was just the pass catching wide receiver, where Gabe's going to be a little bit of everything. I don't know. I think that's the Houston Texans division to win easily. Jacksonville is kind of fighting for that wild card and on the verge of kind of getting lost in the bunch because they're going to have to make a decision on Trevor Lawrence sooner than later. And you make the wrong decision on Trevor Lawrence and pay him, $65 million a year, because that's probably going to be where the contracts start to go. That Jacksonville team could quickly fall from, hey, maybe a wild card team to behind Indy, and who knows, maybe Will Levis makes a jump, and suddenly Jacksonville's at the bottom of the South. Last player I want to bring up, and we'll probably talk about him a little bit more later, is one of your team's players. And I think, and the biggest offseason signing outside of Kirk Cousins, Christian Wilkins. And I think that this is a awesome signing for the Raiders. Pairing Max Crosby with Christian Wilkins, that defensive front is going to be scary. I'm happy that Christian Wilkins is out of the AFC East and no longer, grabbing certain parts of Josh Allen or all the parts of Josh Allen. And now he's going to be doing that to Patrick Mahomes. What was your thought process when you saw Christian Wilkins going to the Las Vegas Raiders?
They were trying to sign Wilkins last summer, and Wilkins wanted what was rumored to be, you'll never know, but you always heard like they weren't able to come to a number. And the rumor was that he wanted Dexter Lawrence like really high, like 25 million type a season, a year money. He'd never really had the sack production until this year. Granted, a lot of that's because of Flores' scheme where it's like tie up blockers and let the blitzers clean up. But so he moved into the Fangio scheme this year and he kind of bet on himself. And when he got the 9 sacks to accompany with his run stopping, we knew, or at least I knew, the writing was on the wall. I doubt he was going to come back. People don't realize he's actually kind of old because he was an old rookie. So he's going to be 29 years old this year. So this is it. This is his big shot at the payday, right? So can't blame him. $27.5 million per season. There's no way Miami was going to be able to match that. And to be honest, no, I don't know if I want to. Like, he's not Chris Jones and he's not Aaron Donald. We love him. I wish him nothing but the best. Do you watch hockey at all?
Rarely.
In hockey, teams always have a goon, right? The guy that gets underneath the other guy's skin. He was our guy, obviously. If you played against him, you didn't like him. If he played on your team, you love him. But and other things too, like his hustle, right? Like he would make tackles 30, 40 yards downfield. There's no other defensive tackle that's running 40 yards downfield and making tackles. It's just, and he played 80%, almost 83, 84% of the plays, something like that, which is unheard of. He like doesn't come off the field. So all that being said, it stings to see him go. Hopefully we get that 3rd rounder for him next year. And, I would assume Patrick Mahomes is invested in a new cup.
Yes. Yeah. I'll say the one thing you kind of opened my eyes to. I did not realize he's 28, going to turn 29 at some point this year. He was a 24-year-old rookie, so he is up there. And that was something I didn't kind of factor into all this, that this is his contract. After this, there isn't going to be another big one, so he's going to sign the biggest one he can. And I mean, for the Raiders, I also like what you said about Goon, and I actually tweeted something out earlier this offseason that I want the Bills to go find essentially their Goon, find somebody that gets under people's skins. And the two players that come to mind when I think about that is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Christian Wilkins. They piss everyone off that they play against, but if they're on your team, you probably love them because you can see them riling everyone up and getting in people's heads. Christian Wilkins honestly did that every single time the Bills played the Dolphins. He did that not only to Bills fans, but to Josh Allen. Every single play, he was getting in Josh's head, which, as annoying as that is as a Bills fan, strategically, it just made, so much sense.
Yeah, the one game we won, that he got that penalty where he nailed Wilkins because we assume he grabbed him under the pile, and that was a big one. That was a huge penalty. But yeah, no, it's going to suck to see him go. But again, $27.5 million for a 29-year-old by the end of the year defensive tackle. It's just, I hope he does well with the Raiders. Not too well when he plays us, but hopefully he does well.
For sure. We'll get back to kind of talking about Wilkins and the Dolphins' losses holistically. But do you have any other kind of free agent moves outside of the AFC East you can really think of or you want to highlight? Or are you good to move on?
Danielle Hunter going to Houston.
Yeah. Yep.
Because Will Anderson is a monster, and he's only going to get better. I also really liked DJ Reader to Detroit, because stopping the run was something that they were, having a bit of trouble with. I think that's a huge move. And I think quietly, it never really got talked about, but I think the Bengals picking up Von Bell again is going to be a good signing for them, because he was really good for them. And then he left to sign a good free agent deal. They cut him and now he's back. So those are three of the ones that I was looking at. But I keep looking at Houston, and I like what they're doing over there. They're building it up the right way, and getting a Danielle Hunter off the season he just had to pair with Will Anderson, that's scary.
Yeah, Danielle Hunter with Will Anderson. They also brought in Folu Fatukasi, who was a little bit on the Bills' radar this offseason. You got Derek Stingley, who at times last year looked like he might be the best corner in the entire NFL. Jalen Petrie at safety. Like, they have all the building blocks to an elite defense. Add that to what they have on offense with CJ Stroud, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, like Dalton Schultz, a decent offensive line, and they have this team, assuming CJ Stroud, keeps improving or doesn't regress at all. The Texans are a scary, scary team right now.
I would bet good money that Xavier Howard ends up playing the other cornerback position for them next year.
That is spicy. Yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to monitor. I know there were some rumors also. I think Trey White had some rumors about the Raiders maybe being one of his destinations. I wonder if he's down there in the South somewhere looking at one of these teams too in the AFC as like kind of a little bit of a I don't know. It's going to be so weird seeing Trey White and Xavier Howard in different uniforms this season.
Yeah. I'm hoping they both went to go play in Arizona or something. It stings when they're in the other conference,
Yeah. But for both teams, both Trey White and Xavier Howard, I think it was the right time. I mean, your opinion. I don't know your opinion on Xavier Howard, but at least mine with Trey White, it really sucked. He was one of the biggest fan favorites for the Bills, but I mean, truly the time for the Bills to kind of move on, which is just frustrating. How about you with Xavier Howard?
Same for us. It's just too much money at that point. He's coming off, the contract was based on when he was a premier player. Injuries and age have kind of robbed him a bit. He's still good, but he's not. You can't pay him $21 million a year at this point. I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's why I'm kind of excited that we pivoted to Fuller for a lot less.
For sure. Yeah. And we 100% will get into that. We're going to pivot to the state of the AFC East right now. At this current state in free agency, obviously still a lot is going to change, whether that be more free agencies, possibly trades down the line, and of course the draft. But right now, I think is a good time, I guess, to kind of review each of these 4 teams. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hop through all 4 teams. We're going to do the first 2 fairly quick because I don't think our expertise each aligns with them as much as the final 2 teams. So start with Patriots, Jets, then we'll do Dolphins, Bills to kind of round things out before we shut down this podcast. But I just start with the Patriots, right? They lost, and these are just some key names. These aren't all the names they lost, and they're not all the names they added, but the major losses they had: Mac Wilson, linebacker; Devontae Parker, wide receiver; Jalen Mills, corner; and Mike Gesicki, tight end. They brought in Antonio Gibson, running back; Jacoby Brissett at quarterback; Sion Takitaki, a linebacker; and KJ Osborne, wide receiver. I don't think that this is going to be a good team this year. I'm fairly confident they're going to draft a quarterback. I think Jacoby Brissett was a good addition with them moving on from Mac Jones, as he can kind of carry the ship while they ready whatever that quarterback they take is. But I don't really think the Patriots are going anywhere fast. I love to see that because both you and I had to deal with the Patriots for 20 years when they were kings of the world. Where do you think the Patriots are going next year? Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel in 2024? Do you think this is a 2025, 2026 discussion?
Unless the quarterback has like a CJ Stroud type, rookie year, they're going to be bad. They're going to be like 5 wins. Actually, and Belichick's not even there anymore, right? So you can't even say, like, even when they were bad, you knew they were still going to win 7 games because regardless of how bad of a GM he was, Belichick's one of the premier coaches in NFL history. They don't even have that anymore. So this could be really bad unless that quarterback, like I said, turns into like a superstar rookie. It's like 4 or 5 wins.
Yeah. I think that that's a good way to look. Like the past couple of years, they were talent devoid. Like they just didn't have talent on that roster. And as much, again, as Bill Belichick gets clowned and people want to say, Tom Brady made Bill Belichick, all this stuff, he did kind of make them competitive week in and week out. I mean, they made the playoffs, 3 years ago now? Geez, okay, that was 3 years ago. But nonetheless, he was making them competitive in games this season that they shouldn't have been competitive in. Now Gerard Mayo is kind of that. We don't know what Gerard Mayo is. Like we have no idea as a coach what he could be a disaster. And if he is, that 5 wins that this team might be able to get might be 3, might be 2. This could be an absolute disaster for Patriots fans. Something they've deserved for a long time.
Sorry, they have some nice guys on D. I really like. They re-signed Uche for $3 million.
Yep.
Great deal. They re-signed Onwenu, was smart. Don't forget, they're going to get Christian Gonzalez back, and I think that guy is going to be a superstar. I think he's exceptionally good. Duggar's still there. What's his name? Wolverines, their safety. What's his name? He's still there,
Peppers?
Right? Yeah, Jabril Peppers has really blossomed with them. They have some talent on defense. Its offense is going to really struggle. So I think you're right, but I think their defense will be just decent enough to keep them in enough games that maybe, like, we don't want them getting the first pick, right? We're rooting for 6 and I guess it's weird now. It's 6 and 11. We're rooting for 6 and 11 for the next decade.
Yeah. You mentioned Kyle Duggar too. They put the transition tag on him, which I despise them for doing. Not that the Bills were ever going to be able to afford Kyle Duggar, but he has been one of my favorite non-Bills just to watch. He just can do so much. Him probably coming back to the Patriots, because I'm assuming everyone's staying away from him because they don't want to play with that transition tag. But that secondary, and Christian Gonzalez before he got hurt was damn good, and I just expect him to come back from his injury and be just as good, here in 2024. All right, shift to the Jets. Key losses: Bryce Huff, defensive end; Jordan Whitehead, safety; Bryce Hall, corner; Quentin Jefferson, defensive tackle. So no really massive ones. I guess Bryce Huff, decently big one. They brought in Tyrod Taylor, quarterback; Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle; Tyron Smith, offensive tackle; and John Simpson, offensive guard. Of all of the teams in the AFC East, I think the Jets improved the most compared to what they were last season, meaning they didn't lose a ton of talent and they brought in guys that in theory should make this team better.
Absolutely. They also traded for Morgan Moses to play right tackle. So they rebuilt their entire line. Then they got the 2 young guys, Tippmann and Elijah Vera Tucker, who are really good players. Who knows how many games you're going to get out of Tyron Smith? It's the Teron Armstead, like sit back and hope. But if he plays, oh man, with him, Simpson's a good guard. I remember him out of Clemson. The Moses is decent at right tackle. They basically, that was their Achilles heel, was obviously the Rodgers. Well, I guess that was a play on words. It was the Rodgers injury. But after that, their offensive line was terrible. And now that's on paper a very good offensive line. So I agree with you. I think they're the most improved team. I mean, they're going to be regardless just when Rodgers steps back onto the field based compared to Wilson or, whoever else, Boyle and those other guys they trotted out last year. But with that offensive line, they're clearly the most improved on paper.
Yeah, they took their two greatest weaknesses, in my opinion, their offensive line and their quarterback, and they improved on both. And the improvement on quarterback is Tyrod Taylor, just ignoring Aaron Rodgers, who I think comes back, and I think he'll still be good. I don't think he's going to be the Aaron Rodgers that Jets fans want him to be. But Tyrod Taylor gives you that floor where Tyrod's good enough to still be an NFL quarterback as compared to, like you said, Tim Boyle, disaster, Zach Wilson, disaster, whoever else they trotted out last year. Trevor Siemian, did they do last year as well?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, just not good. I think that with Tyrod there, even if Aaron kind of struggles early on, let's say he sustains another minor injury where you need Tyrod to step in for a game or two, that alone, your floor is higher than it was last year. And the Jets ended up still being decent.
Easily the best Giants quarterback last year.
Despite some people trying to tell you that the certain Italian guy was the best quarterback to ever play in New Jersey. I mean, so Bills and Dolphins aside, the Jets, they're going to be competitive, and they're going to kind of give, I think, both the Dolphins and Bills fits at points next season. Yeah,
I'm worried.
Yeah. All right, so let's hop into the two kind of meat and potatoes of this entire show. And one of the main reasons I brought you on is to talk Dolphins, obviously. I'm going to just throw out a couple names of the Dolphins players, just losses and additions. I know there's more, and we'll get into kind of a little bit of all of it, but let's just quickly get through that. Losses, Christian Wilkins, who we already mentioned, Robert Hunt, who signed a massive deal, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Brandon Jones. They bring in Jordan Brooks, Aaron Brewer, Kendall Fuller, Jonnu Smith, and then we'll talk about him a little bit more maybe when we get to the Bills part. Jordan Poyer, who I saw did his introductory kind of Twitter video today.
Yeah, I laughed. The Broncos, I don't know what they're doing over there. So Brandon Jones is actually a backup safety, and he signed for more money than the starter did. The starter was Deshaun Elliott last year. Mm-hmm. He's solid. He's not a superstar, but he's very solid. Good tackler, decent player. He signed with the Steelers, which really stung. When Brandon Jones, I heard we re-signed him, and I was furious because the guy can't cover. I called him the gardener. All he does is tend the grass out there. He can't find anyone in zone. And Denver signed him to $20 million. I was like, thank you. So that worked out well. For us, obviously, the three big ones are Van Ginkel, Wilkins, and Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt was our best offensive lineman. He was really good in our scheme, surprisingly, because I guess he was a former tackle, so he's a little more athletic than the traditional guard. I should say he was a tackle in college. He even played some right tackle for us. He was just really good. And but $100 million for a guard,
wild.
It's just too much. That's the same thing. So Miami's playing a little game right now where a lot of the guys they're picking up are guys like Jordan Poyer that were dropped from other teams and released. And they're really watching the compensatory formula because they're trying to garner two third round picks for both Hunt and Wilkins. And Van Ginkel stings too because he's that third edge, especially because Miami has Chubb and Phillips that are both coming off injury. So we're not sure if they're going to be ready for the start of the season. So those are the three guys, and Deshaun Elliott. Those four guys are the ones that we're going to miss the most out of those free agent departures. Some of the other guys, I'm not. Raekwon Davis and Brandon Jones, they're guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And as far as comp picks go, so I just hopped over the cap quick just to double check it. As of right now, theoretically, and over the cap's not always right on it. They weren't right this year for the Bills, but right now the Dolphins would be set up in 2025 to have 2 third-round picks via Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt, and a 7th round pick from Deshaun Elliott if all things kind of stay the same, which that's still fluid and everything will move around. But yeah, I mean, that's a strategy you have to use when you lose somebody like Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt. The Dolphins need to, in my opinion, they need to get younger and try to find some players in the draft. Why not grab 2 third-round picks for 2 players that got paid? And I mean, got Robert Hunt $100 million. That's getting paid. So the strategy kind of makes sense there. But the talent loss from Wilkins and Hunt, in my opinion, is concerning. And seeing how they replace that, especially defensive tackle. So just kind of go there for a second. What's the plan? Do you think that's draft? Because losing Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis, now it's just Zach Seiler, I believe, is the main guy right now.
Yeah. So Seiler was awesome last year. They just re-signed him, 10 sacks. He's been fantastic. He does a lot of the dirty work too. He's less of a pure penetration 3 than, and not quite like just the run stopper. He's a bit of both, maybe a little bit kind of like Daquan Jones in like size and comparables, and mainly, like a run stopper, but also having some pass rush prowess. The plan, I think, is they're going to address it in the draft. And then I'm going to assume once the draft is over and the compensatory formula is done, they're going to try and get one of those older veterans, that to come in, probably like a quicker penetration guy, like a three tech, to come in and try and provide some form of pass rush on third downs.
Yeah, and that seems to be like the strategy a lot of these cap-strapped teams are using right now. The Bills did it last year. They waited until closer to the summer to go out and get Leonard Floyd, and he ended up being a massive signing for Buffalo now with San Francisco. But yeah, I think that's probably where the Dolphins are going to kind of wait and go and get one of those vet guys. I think the Bills probably end up doing that for a couple positions as well. And I think that's something a lot of fans, and myself included at times, struggle kind of wrapping my head around. The idea of like, I want this and I want it now, but in reality, it doesn't make sense for it right now. It's better for us to wait until down the line when we lock in 2 third-round picks for the Dolphins per se. I would have presumed that's the strategy for them as well. I'm going to hop over to Jordan Poyer for a second too, and talk from a Bills perspective about it. It sucks. As a Bills fan, again, I mentioned how much it sucked to lose Trey White. It sucks to lose Jordan Poyer. It sucks that he signed with the Miami Dolphins, but it made all of the sense in the world, literally all of the sense in the world. I think we all thought that was going to happen last summer. It didn't. He came back to Buffalo. Now he signs with Miami for $2 million. I think a lot of Bills fans are talking themselves kind of into it to a point where they're saying things like, he's washed, he's no good anymore. He's not 2020 Jordan Poyer, but he's still a solid player, and I think he brings something to the Dolphins where he could be that other safety that sits next to Javon Holland, and Holland in a 70% of what Jordan Poyer was. That's a pretty solid safety duo.
Yeah, it's an upgrade over what we had last year. So one of the things with the outlook for Miami, regarding like the defense as a whole, is they lost, some guys, but other than defensive tackle, I think they've upgraded at safety. I think they've upgraded at corner, and I think they've upgraded at linebacker. So I do like that, and all with cheaper options. Regardless of 70% of Poyer for $2 million, once you pay $2 million, it doesn't really matter what happens. Even if he goes out and gets injured again, type thing. I mean, you don't want that, of course, but like, it's $2 million. His kids go to school here. He lives in Miami in the off season. He goes to the same golf. He's a member at the same thing as Tua. I think because you guys cut him, right? So there's some things I know. We'll talk after the show.
Okay.
But based on last year, there was a lot of signs that pointed to him signing with Miami. Unfortunately, I don't think they had the money to give Poyer what he was looking for. They ended up signing Deshaun Elliott for about like $2.3 million or something like that. And the Bills offered Poyer a 2-year deal for some, decent amount of money. And I'm sure the thought of playing with your guys again, He's obviously very close with Micah Hyde, going back to play. If he wasn't going to be Miami, I'm sure he'd rather stay in Buffalo. It's just his family really wanted Miami. I think and it's just easier. So it's probably his last ride. Maybe he gets another year. Who knows? I'm not sure where his head's at. It seems, I follow him on social media, seems he's getting into some other ventures and things like that now. And it seems like, when he got past his partying days and stuff, he's been pretty smart with what he does with his money and things like that. So I think he's a kind of guy that could have, a very bright future after football. But if this is it, why not play at home one last time? You know what I mean? Where he's from, or where he lives, I should say, at least.
Yeah. And I think you answered RJ's question perfectly. And RJ said, if Poyer was cool taking $2 million a season, why wouldn't he take a pay cut here? I honestly think even if the Bills offered him, let's say the Bills offered him 3.5 or even 4, let's say 4 million, I think he might still take 2 million from the Dolphins. And I do think a lot of it's because he wants to be there. And I think that's a really tough pill for a lot of Bills fans to swallow, myself included, because part of me, I have Jordan Poyer's jersey in my closet. I wear it every single away game that the Bills play. I put it on a Jordan Poyer jersey. So it kind of stinks to know that he's a guy that wanted to go play for Miami, but really no skin off my back. Like, it makes complete sense that he wants to do it. His family's there. Like you said, his kids go to school down there. Like, why not be a little closer to home? And as much as
now, Hyde's gone now, it's not the same, right?
Exactly.
It's from that perspective, like I don't know him personally, but like his closest friends, like in the secondary, there's been obviously a big change, and now's the time. Plus, I'm sure, I don't know, I would take whatever because I'm not an NFL player, but I'm sure these guys have a bit of pride too. When you get cut, it probably stings a little. So, like you said, I don't think it's anything against Buffalo. I don't think he has any hard feelings with Buffalo.
Yeah.
I really think this is just his last ride. For us, it's amazing because I want him more than for just the player he is, because this year, Miami switching defensive schemes again. We're brought in Anthony Weaver. He's going to bring in that Baltimore scheme, and having a guy like him, who's such a good leader, who's so smart and instinctual, to line everyone up. Remember the first game we played against you guys last year, the one where we were talking about earlier, where Miami went and scored, you scored, we scored, and then all of a sudden you blew us out. Do you remember how many blown coverages there were in that game? Like, Knox was like wide open, like it was really bad. I think someone like Poyer, with his leadership and his ability to grasp new schemes, he's going to help Miami line up and get the correct communication in. And I think that's really underrated. That's not being talked enough about as to why he's going to benefit Miami. I think just getting everyone lined up and just having an older, like a leader back there to help process everything is going to be a big benefit.
Yeah. And you also add that to the, to Javon Holland too, right? Javon Holland, who I think's one of the budding kind of superstars on the defensive side of the ball. Now he gets Jordan Poyer, who's been around the block, seen a little bit of everything, and can probably teach Javon Holland a thing or two, and maybe even elevate his game a little bit more. So you could see a better version of Javon Holland. You could see a more rejuvenated version of Jordan Poyer. So while, like you said, there are losses on the defense, the Dolphins have done a decent job of filling the holes and kind of mitigating the issues. I think a lot of people see the names too, right? They see Xavier Howard, and they think, well, oh my gosh, how are they going to, deal with Xavier Howard being cut and things along those lines. I don't think he wasn't the same Xavier Howard anymore. I don't think he was at that, in my opinion, but they did a good job. I still, man, I don't want to say it before the draft, but I still think it's Bills and Dolphins are the two teams to beat in the AFC East. The Jets are lurking, but the Dolphins didn't lose enough for me to think that the Jets are necessarily hopping them at this point.
Yeah, and the big thing for us is going to be how quickly our pass rushers get back. We did sign Shaq Barrett.
True.
He had, and the idea is he was cut, so he's not a restricted free agent. He doesn't count towards compensatory formula. We're going to bring him in. He just needs to last. Like, you need, like, this guy, he's just going to come out. He's going to have a bunch of snaps the first couple of weeks. Then when the guys come back, he's just going to move to like a reserve third down kind of role. He had a bit of a down year from a sack perspective last year, but his pressure numbers were still pretty good. And it's awkward to talk about, but remember he had a personal tragedy in his life. His daughter drowned at the beginning of the year, and I doubt his head's in the game. So who knows? Maybe that might end up being like a good signing for us, as kind of a bargain signing where he gets 1 or 2 years left. It's just a 1-year deal, so get one good year left, and he kind of gets rejuvenated. So.
Yeah, he could. Maybe he's their Leonard Floyd this season, where he kind of, puts up an 8-9 sacks, and like you said, his job isn't to be a stud. His job is to kind of be a placeholder until you get Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb back.
This year's Melvin Ingram. Yeah. Good point. And I think Poyer. I don't think the plan is for him to be. I think they're not done at safety. I think they're going to get another safety that's going to be more of a on the roof type. And then they can have Poyer playing closer to the line of scrimmage, Holland kind of roaming around in that Kyle Hamilton type role. And then they'll have their, Marcus Williams, that type of player who's just going to play, your Micah Hyde type role, making sure nothing gets behind him. So I think they're going to move Poyer a little closer to the line this year than,
Yeah, and that's actually, the Bills did a lot of that last year too. They started creeping Poyer forward when they were kind of trying to figure out how to make the defense work after they lost Matt Milano and Trey White and those guys. And Poyer worked pretty well closer to the line. It wouldn't surprise me if that's his role there too. He's kind of that third safety. And also, not that I expect this to happen. I expect Poyer to be on the roster. They only signed him for $2 million. That by no means guarantees he will be on the team. I do think he makes that roster fairly easily, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that, something happens in camp where they're just like, all right, we're good without you.
Don't forget we got Taron Neal back there now too.
Yeah, special team stud. All our guys just going down to Florida, whether it be Jacksonville or Miami. I mean, is what it is, I guess. Speaking of which, do you have anything else on the Dolphins?
No, I think we talked a little bit. I think that they're going to struggle on offensive line. I don't know what they're doing. They signed Brewer, if Brewer's going to go anywhere in the NFL and be successful, it would be Miami because of their run scheme that they use. They want their center to be like incredibly agile and have movement skills. They ask a lot of their centers in their screen game and the run game to really get out to the second level, and he excels at that. I think he's going to be really good this year for Miami for run blocking. The problem is he weighs like $160, and I'm afraid Daquan Jones is going to toss him aside like a child. But in the run game, he should be an asset. They re-signed Isaiah Wynn to play left guard today for really cheap. He was really good for us last year. Shockingly, he got hurt, which he has every year in his career. So, but if we can get another body in there, then I'm not too thing. I like the Kendall Fuller. We're obviously hoping that Smith, our second round rookie last year, is going to play a lot more this year. Yeah. He'll play outside. Fuller and Ramsey both have inside outside versatility. So you're able to move. I think the plan was to try and move Ramsey around more this year and onto key matchups and stuff like that. But other than that,
did they bring Nick Needham back?
They did. They brought Needham back, and they still have Cater Kohu, who stunk last year, but his rookie year he was good. So I don't think he was in the right role. He's a bit more of a man corner from the old scheme when he got not drafted, but an undrafted free agent, as opposed to that heavy zone. And when they put him outside against you guys, like he's not an outside guy. It's just that was a terrible decision by Fangio. But other than that, you're just kind of hoping for internal, like Jonnu Smith. He's not a superstar, but he's a definite upgrade over what we had. The other guys we had were just bums that were blockers, right? Mm-hmm. So at least he gives you a little something. You can't just leave him wide open. And then we're obviously hoping for a healthy year from Devin Achane. And that's going to be, if he can stay healthy, which is a big if, but if he can, he's special.
Yeah, it's on the tight end side. It's so interesting that the past few years of how the Dolphins have transitioned with tight ends and different like stylistic personalities. Let's say you had Mike Gesicki, who's not really a tight end. He's basically a wide receiver, but you had him as your tight end. Then you went to Durham Smythe, who's a blocking tight end. And now you're with Jonnu Smith, who hasn't really kind of broken out in the NFL, let's say, but he can block and he can catch. So now you're right in the middle of the two. Maybe Jonnu Smith is that third option for Tua with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, and maybe that makes that offense all the more dangerous. And then like you said, Achane, like, oh my gosh, when that guy gets running, he's a scary runner to have to defend, because if he hits a hole and finds a gap, it's done. He's gone. I don't like playing a player like that, because you can have someone bottled up completely, but if they just bounce to the right spot, it's over. It's touchdown.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? You have enough of those guys. Tua's got his limitations, obviously, and you have, but the goal is to get the ball into Waddle, Hill, Achane, Mostert's hands. Probably the fastest 4 players on any one team in the league, like as a combined, and have them get the ball in their hands to see what they can do. And while you don't have, where Josh Allen's so magical is his ability to extend plays and just pick up those crucial first downs with his legs and stuff like that, he can extend those long drives. Whereas Miami, the goal is to try and score quick and be able to score from anywhere and really stress the defense to spread them out and cover the hole, horizontally as opposed to vertically, but horizontally, so that because of the speed. So, well, it worked decently last year for year 2. Let's see if maybe they make another leap in year 3.
Yeah, as a Bills fan that obviously does not like the Dolphins, when that game plan is working the way it's supposed to work, it's almost indefendable, right? Like you can't slow down the speed they have if everything's working the way they want. It's when certain things start to fall apart, the pressure starts to come, that things change. Let's see if Mike McDaniel has some sort of some adjustments this year where he can take those kind of issue moments and turn them into an ability to kind of expose defenses in different ways. All right, gonna hop to the Bills. I don't think this will be as long as the Dolphins, just because while the Bills do have a good amount of changes, we've talked about in the show a good amount. I'm just going to throw out a couple key losses, a couple key additions for Buffalo. Losses: Gabe Davis, obviously, who we already spoke about. Leonard Floyd, I briefly touched on this with San Francisco now. Mitch Morris cut down in Florida with everybody else, this time on Jacksonville. Trey White cut, remains to be seen where he goes. Jordan Poyer, again in Florida, on the Dolphins. The key additions for Buffalo: Curtis Samuel is probably the biggest one, right? Wide receiver. He'll take over for Gabe Davis. Mitch Trubisky, backup quarterback. Nicholas Morrow and Matt Collins. So of all of the teams in the AFC East, it's probably the, I don't want to say worst set of additions, but the least inspiring set of additions. The only one that really should have an impact is Curtis Samuel, who does have speed to extend or to kind of open up the field. Speed that the Bills, frankly, haven't really ever had during the Josh Allen era. He could be an interesting upgrade over Gabe Davis. He is also a downgrade in other ways. Mitch Trubisky really isn't an anything in the same way that Kyle Allen wasn't. If Josh Allen goes down, the season's over anyway. Nicholas Morrow, he takes over for Tyrell Dodson, kind of as that reserve linebacker. Hopefully Matt Milano comes back healthy, and so does Terrell Bernard. And then Matt Collins is your Trent Sherfield style wide receiver. He's a special teams guy. He'll do a little blocking from time to time, maybe make a play or two in the red zone. But
I love him.
Bills. Do you like Matt Collins?
I love Matt Collins. You guys are going to love Matt Collins. He's not.
He was
a
Dolphin, right?
For a long time, yeah. And we loved him. He's He's an upgrade over Sherfield as a special teamer, and Sherfield's a good special teamer. This guy is probably going to be your new Saron Neal. Like, this guy is an amazing gunner. He's he's ripped up, roided out probably, but he runs really fast. He's the one, if you remember the game, Miami game, when they were playing the Colts to try and get into like the playoffs a couple of years ago, and Fitz was in, and they tore Fitz's helmet, remember? And he threw the ball anyways, and it was Matt Collins that caught the ball. So Matt Collins has made some really clutch plays. He had a game-winning touchdown with Tua, threw like a jump ball to him. He's massive. He's fast. He's not like, don't come in and think he's going to blow things out, but he's going to be amazing on special teams. He's a fantastic blocker, like a really, really, really good blocker. And he's just a great dude. He's a little weird, but I think you guys will like him. I love Matt Collins. I wish he was still on Miami.
Yeah, I saw something about how he's not the biggest fan of cats. Have you seen that quote?
I have, yeah. He doesn't trust
Okay.
them, but yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of caused some waves through Bills Mafia, his opinion on cats. But yeah, I mean he's a fine signing. I think that
Mhm.
he can fill a couple roles. But like you said, he's not going to blow the top off. He's not going to come in and go for 1,000 yards for Buffalo. But at the same, I think the Bills did enough to you look at the roster now, there's still a couple issues, especially talk about like defensive tackle. They really just have Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver, Eli Anku behind the two of them, but Anku is more of a practice squad style player. There's a couple holes they have to fill, but that's what the draft's for. We also mentioned how, after the draft, once the compensatory picks lock in, that's when you can go get a couple guys to fill a couple more holes on the roster. I think the Bills are fine right now. Safety is a glaring need. There's rumors of Justin Blackman, if I'm saying that name right.
Yeah.
I might be saying the wide receiver's name, is visiting the Bills. Maybe that's the signing they make. I think the Bills will be okay. I want to see what they do in the draft, though, because I still do think there's some issues on this roster that they can kind of hide because they still do have high-end talent in players like Josh Allen, Ed Oliver, Taron Johnson, Terrell Bernard, and Matt Milano.
Mhm. I really like Julian Blackman. If you guys sign him, I would be sad. He's skill set wise, he's similar to Micah Hyde. He's going to be the guy. He's what I was talking about. Miami needs the guy that sits there as your last line of defense and he plays, your single high. He's a single high guy. I loved him when he was coming out of Utah. I liked his ball skills. That would be a really good signing. If I were you guys, I'd be pumped that if you guys signed him. Came off a pretty good year with the Colts. I think he had 4 picks this year. Good speed, former corner. So kind of like that Hyde, former corner convert. And he's good. Don't sign him, please. Yeah. But
he posted a just very basic stat, but 46.6 passer rating against this year for Julian Blackman. Like solid player for the Colts. It would be interesting if he came over to Buffalo, similar to Micah Hyde, in that Micah has played corner in his career, similar to Jordan Poyer, who played corner in college. The Bills kind of need that Micah Hyde-esque player, though, because if Taylor Rapp is your other safety, he's more that thumper, that guy that's going to come down the box and make a tackle. I don't really trust Taylor Rapp playing center field against a deep ball. So if that happens to be Julian Blackman, that is the player that can play that Hyde role, I'm sure that Sean McDermott will identify it and say, yep, sign this guy today.
Yeah, because you need that, right? Because your whole defense is predicated on not giving up big plays. You're the antithesis of my offense, right? So you want the 12, 13 play drives. And it's about, then that's why you were so good for so long, because you couldn't get behind Hyde and Poyer, right? It's in their heydays and stuff like that. So getting a guy that won't let anyone behind them is going to be really big for you. But I mean, your biggest addition is Matt Milano. I get it. I get into a lot of trouble a lot of times doing this, but Milano is like my favorite non-Dolphin defender. Like my favorite defender in the NFL to watch that's not, a Miami guy is Matt Milano. I get a lot of heat for saying that, but from Dolphins fans. But man, he's good. Are you sure you guys need him? You can send him down. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to send him down, I'll give you a ding dong for him
No, I mean, you follow me on Twitter, so you know my true feelings about Matt Milano, but you were 100% spot on that. I think that he is the reason for the most optimism for Bills fans on the defensive side of the ball, because, we've talked about all the losses, most of which were cuts with Trey White, Jordan Poyer, and Micah Hyde. The reason you can kind of supplement those losses is Matt Milano, because if he comes back and he can play at the level that we know that he's been able to play with Terrell Bernard, who ascended this year, and next to Matt Milano would be even better. You have that middle of that field taken care of, where now all of a sudden you can start protecting the safeties, start protecting the defensive tackles if the rotation's not there. Yeah, Matt Milano, you're 100% right, is the biggest addition, assuming he comes back healthy, because he is a uniquely special talent in the NFL and has been for a few years now.
And don't sleep on Daquan Jones if he can play a full year. I added him to Twitter, and I was trying to recruit him bad to Miami. That was my number one target, because I knew we weren't going to sign even before Wilkins left. I said, there's no way we're signing Wilkins. He's going to want $25 million a year. Sign Daquan for 10, no state tax, bring him down here. And he was playing at an all-pro level at the beginning of last year. Got hurt. I know when he came back, he wasn't quite as, but you can't expect him to. I was shocked he came back anyways. So it's a great signing for you guys. And he really makes that Oliver work, right? Because Oliver struggles if he doesn't have someone beside him to take, some beef beside him to kind of take up some of the double teams. And when he was playing, that's when Oliver was at his best. And it pisses me off. Yeah, I really wanted it to.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. I don't really have much else on the AFC East as it stands right now. Do you have anything else you want to throw out there? Regardless, AFC East, NFL, anything you want to bring up?
No, I think we went through most of it. I think the Bills, like you said, their not status quo, but like we know who they are. We know who they're going to be. And we know that their improvements are going to come through guys returning. The one thing if I were a Bills fan, the one thing I would watch is that doesn't get talked enough about, in my opinion, is the loss of Mitch Morse. Last year, I know you guys suffered a lot of injuries on defense, but you were the only offensive line in the NFL, I believe, that started all 5 starters for every game. And Mitch Morse has been there. I know he's had some concussions in the past, but he's reliable. He's dependable. He's really good. And he's been there for a long time, getting everyone lined up, getting everyone, you know what I mean? Like,
for sure,
making protection calls, stuff like that. He's been with Allen. You slid over McGovern, is it? Is
correct.
That who's the expected? Yeah. So anytime you have a new center, I know he's played center before, but anytime you have a new center, you got to watch the exchanges. You got to watch the chemistry with the quarterback. Don't count out Mitch Morse's loss as being impactful, because that guy was still playing at a really high level, and having the cohesiveness and the chemistry that you had last year is so invaluable, because offensive lines I don't think they're less talented than they used to be. I think the difference between then and now is, in the old days, it was harder. It was easier to keep offensive lines intact. And then free agency came about, and then the tackles went up really up in price. So then you had to kind of pick and choose who you wanted to keep. And you guys had the same 5 guys every game. And you've had a very similar, I know you added Osiris Torrance in the draft, who was a good rookie, but Brown's been there this is his 4th year?
4th year, yep.
Yeah, and then you've had Dawkins now for 7, I think. And then you had Morse, I think, for 6. And it matters when you have your center and your 2 tackles and you have that stability, because then when you do put in new guards and stuff like that, they're playing again in between 2 guys that have been there for a really long time. So I don't know. I just I that's the one thing I would watch in the off season. It's the only concern I have. At the end of the day, Allen's going to be Allen. And there's the ridiculous Diggs rumors. He's still going to come out, catch over 100 balls, 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns. So, and your defense will be year 2 under Sean McDermott, right? I know it's been his scheme traditionally, but repetition makes, better. And he knows he's got more of a feel now probably for what works and what doesn't work. And you could see some improvements on that end too.
For sure. I will, I'll just throw one thing that you said back, because I think it's really important. The Mitch Morse loss, the pre-snap reasons are going to be massive, because of his ability to identify blitzers, communicate with the offensive line, and communicate with Josh Allen. That pre-snap stuff is something that I am worried about. I'm sure David and I will dive a lot more into that over the next couple months and talk about how we think Connor McGovern and David Edwards are going to do in their new positions on this Bills offensive line. But that's a great point by you, Kevin. Kevin, this has been awesome, man. Like I said at the start of this, you're one of the few Dolphins fans that I can consistently talk to in a, what's the word? It's like in a fair manner, right? Where we both are having a conversation instead of just screaming at each other. So this was enlightening. I learned a couple things today. I sincerely appreciate you coming on. Anything you want to plug, anything you want to, you're working on? I know you occasionally talk to some of the other football guys, but yeah.
No, I'm just some dude.
Okay.
A long time ago, I'm good friends with Rico. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I got introduced to the Bills. So, well, obviously being a Dolphins fan, but Rico and I are like very close. And so I've seen every Bills game, every play in its entirety for the last 6 years. Because we started watching. So he likes when I come on because I know the Bills. Like I've watched the preseason games, right? So that you're the new Patriots for us. So that's who we got to take down. That's who, I don't think we're going to this year, but that's what we're shooting for, right? So that's just it. And then I just get to know some of you guys through that. And next thing you know, I'm getting invited onto a show, and I don't know, I'm just some dude.
Yeah, I love it, dude. Well, for any Bills fans that want to follow a level-headed Dolphins fan that'll tell you the honest truth in his opinions, his @ is right on the screen right there. So hit that up, follow him. He's a great follow, good guy, nice person. So like I said, again, I appreciate you coming on. I don't really have much else to say. I think we kind of hit every topic I wanted to talk about. I'll say from my end, you can follow me at Uber Hansen. I think next week David will be back on the show. I don't know what we're going to be talking about. I'm sure we're going to do a lot of draft stuff over the next coming week. So tune in next Monday, 7 p.m. as usual, for me and David to be doing some goofy stuff. But other than that, again, Kevin, I really appreciate your time.
There was just one thing I'm a little sad you hadn't asked. You didn't ask me what I was drinking tonight.
Oh, well, I saw you drinking cans. What was in those cans?
That was just a Pepsi Zero or whatever.
Okay.
No, I was laughing though, because I love when you do that on the weekends there. I always follow it. But yeah,
I might be dropping maybe I'll drop a what are you drinking this Friday night? That's a good idea. Yeah. So look out for that, everybody. What are you drinking will be dropped on Twitter. I want to know. I literally care what everyone says because it gives me ideas for what I am going to be drinking that night and the following day and following day and following day after that as well. So cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, do all of that fun stuff. Tell your friends, lovers, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, grandparents. I don't care who about this show, about Cover One. But that's it from our end. And as David always says, bye-bye.